What's up, everyone? This is Max from Amped Magazine. We're interviewing Donnie Gebert, a former U.S. veteran and recent author of A Direct Republic, The Null Hypothesis of Politics, How to Automate a Legislator. That's what we're going to be talking about in these interviews. Visit ampmagazine.net/Donnie Gebert interview for more.
I'm very excited about Libra 2, and I think it's going to, at least the infrastructure is really going to help people, and the currency side of it too, is really going to open people's eyes about the stuff we're talking about, being able to be self-sufficient and, why we need the systems the way they are. And I think, all the things we're kind of talking about are incentivizing that kind of desire for that. So once it actually happens, I think, might see it happen really quick. But I know you talk about in your book, we can't go straight to that, us writing our own laws and stuff. It's kind of like a sovereign citizen thing, but not that extreme. And so we're going to have to, just work with our communities. And that's why I love Brian McClanahan so much. And people that talk about, they don't idolize Lincoln, and they question the whole nationality thing and being one people and one nation. And, it's just such a bad ideology. But his thing is like, we have to, it's just like the Constitution. If you want to be like that, think locally, act locally. That's where you have all your power, and that's where we start, decentralizing things as much as possible. Do you think that once Libra comes about, I guess, do you think the currency thing is going to take hold more, and then it's all going to be one kind of thing where people are starting to work more locally and not being this kind of virtue signaling, like, hey, I read Jake Tapper told me that white supremacy is a thing, and you're questioning that, like, how dare you? And you think so they would just not. These questions wouldn't be popping in their head anymore, because it's like, I'm not, I'm so, if I'm going to be like that to someone on Facebook or whatever that lives, possibly on the other side of the world, maybe I could just do it to my local community and change my local community, because I see the power that I have. Like, do you think that's the way things are going to go?
Listen, I'm going to light a candle for America here, okay? After the Houston hurricane, that is what America looks like. It's a bunch of it's a bunch of people who basically take care of their neighbors. That's what it actually looks like. When you see 1 million people spontaneously doing shit, okay? When you see 1 million people spontaneously helping their neighbors, what did you see the government doing? Not necessarily helping because they didn't know how or didn't understand how. Then trying to prevent other people from how by declaring them unsafe, then declaring them price gougers when they took water to people and charge them. And it's called surge pricing. A lot of people don't understand. When you have a hurricane in Houston, it turns Houston into the Outback. Okay, water is $1.50 a bottle in the Outback. It's not a quarter a bottle. You're not supposed to shower with the water that the bottled water that you buy in the Outback. But if you're living in Houston, you can't just insist that water be 25 cents so that you can shower out of your Evian bottle. It does not work like that. That's not real life. So these people take risks where they could go in and they could make money and they could help that community. Because let's face it, if that community doesn't need any water, dude, man, just drove into a flood zone for no reason with a bunch of water that he can't sell because he's obviously greedy, right? So the way it works out is if anybody is selling water for what you consider an exorbitant price, somebody was super glad to pay for it, and you should keep your personal opinions to yourself. The perception that somebody is not getting water in a flood zone doesn't make sense. They just have to boil it. They have to boil their own water. Do they have gas? Okay, they might not have gas. Do they? I understand that, but at a certain point, every one of us is on our own on this earth. When a natural disaster hits, it's not the government's job to save anyone. As a matter of fact, for thousands of years, there weren't any, and almost everywhere they had storms. Like shit. At a certain point, you have to start living on Earth. You cannot have this social blanket that can fend off a hurricane. You deal with the hurricane when it happens, but you can't preempt a hurricane any more than you can preempt a murder. And the more you try, the bigger disaster you get. Especially with the law. Because the cleanup after a hurricane is fucking obvious, but the cleanup after a murder isn't. So you don't, you can, and especially if you start getting into all of these regulatory enforcement is pre-crime. It's claiming that we understand how to regulate something right down to where we'll penalize you before you do it. It is pre-crime. That's what regulations are.
What if there were no regulations on it and it was like the government competed with private enterprise? Like,
there's no such thing as the government and the organization that those people are running does compete with private enterprise. The only time they don't is when they get the laws changed to make it okay to drag guns in, make people stop and make them work for the government.
Right.
So at a certain point, we're accepting violence for centralized control over economic prosperity, which isn't helping, and it's not working, and it doesn't work that way anyway.
Right.
We had the ability to print and print and print and print and print. Otherwise, the manner in which the federal actors, the people in the government system, they have played that system out. We would have gone bankrupt a long time ago. But because we're the world reserve currency, we got 900 lives of chicanery. Whereas Venezuela didn't have nearly that many, Russia didn't have nearly that many, Zimbabwe, all of the other currencies that you're starting to see having issues now. Australia is having currency issues now. So we are looking at a fiat event on the planet where the governments that printed money and said it was worth nothing, well, they abused and printed and abused and printed and abused and printed. And we'll get back to that later. Let's get into Libra, because Libra is really this conversation anyway. Because Mark Zuckerberg saved me. He's the guy who validated my work, period. I get to say that. I have to say that now because everybody thought I was crazy until Libra showed up. And if you don't understand what Libra is, then you might not understand what I'm saying.
People, well, I don't really want to go down that route. Like, people will say, like, you know, it's like other cryptocurrencies that, like Ripple or whatever, that's tied to the government. But I would say that it's more about the infrastructure. Like, what we're saying is, what you're saying is, you know, it's about the international, the connectivity, as long as there's some light at the end of the tunnel of self-sufficiency, then I think that's all we can ask for, I guess. And like the internet kind of thing. Like, no, I think the government got caught off guard with what they created. You know, with the internet, they didn't, like, these enabling conversations like this. And, you know, I see every day on Facebook or whatever, there's so many people like us. And, you know, even though it doesn't seem like it, I feel like every day there's just more and more people. Like, I knew a girl that I dated for a little bit. She was from Dubai, and she kind of opened my eyes to the Israel-Palestine situation. She wasn't even, like, all that, you know, into it or anything like that. She just was saying, you know, I didn't really like how the Israelis treated the Palestinians in the way their nation was formed. And just, you know, that got, like, a little spark in my head, thinking, like, why, what the hell, like, what happened there? Like, I know there's, like, superficially know that there's a problem there, but what actually happened? And, like, looking into it all and then being vocal about it, you know, like, it sounds superficial, but I feel that as soon as I started opening my mouth about it, that I could see it happen all around me. More and more people were talking about it. And it's like, that's what Jordan Peterson says too. And I love that he says that, like, you don't know how influential you are. You're like 3 people removed from 1 billion people in the world. Like, it's one person, you influence one person, and then they influence someone else, and then influence someone else. That's like 1 billion people, and like you don't know how influential you can actually be. And talking about it now, I am pretty optimistic about what we can conjure up. I think it's just maybe it's more and more the authoritarians will have to I don't know, kind of maybe Epstein is just like a deception kind of thing. Like it's like, look how crazy, there's this huge sexual network that's going on behind the scenes. You have no idea what it's about, and it's just that, and we're protecting it all. The government can do anything, but it's really like they're a paper tiger, and they, all they can do is put money into people's bank accounts and fund a couple operations. But besides
Tiger,
that,
right, will work. Paper Tiger is exactly what Libra demonstrates. Okay, here's Facebook. Now, you and I would all say that Facebook is probably not in a real good position to try to be making PR, I don't want to like power moves, right? They're kind of in the middle of a PR shit show right now, and here they are showing up with a cryptocurrency. Now, the reason that Libra doesn't necessarily represent a direct threat to the dollar, because the dollar is part of the currency pool that it's dealing with. But any system like Libra demonstrates that it can compete with the dollar. And one of the reasons that the dollar has maintained its strength for a very long time was through explicit lack of competition. Okay? So you have to start expecting certain systems to start failing, because the government has relied on them for a bunch of things that it can no longer rely on it for. Printing is going to start causing inflation. Period. It's not everybody like the normies in the market now are expecting certain things from the government, and they don't like it. They don't like the way the currency looks either. So Libra basically demonstrates that Bitcoin could. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm not saying Bitcoin replaces the U.S. dollar. I'm saying Web 3.0 definitely replaces fiat. Okay, if you can imagine like that. Let's be specific about what system changes and what system doesn't. Fiat changes as soon as Web 3.0 gets here. The thing about Libra is it's out of Europe, so it doesn't. I'm not sure if it's Switzerland or Sweden. I have to look into it, but it doesn't really matter. It's not in America. And this is what the real blockchain space has demonstrated. It's called jurisdictional arbitrage. Basically, when you had the transoceanic issue, you wanted all of your real property to be on the continent where it was going to be protected. And then if you were going to have an expensive business dealing that you could take a bath on across the seas, you wanted to limit that exposure because you're going to have another legal system on the other side of that ocean. Well, now, when somebody doesn't like U.S. laws, it's called jurisdictional arbitrage. They're going to pick their shit up. They're going to go to the country that's going to let them do it. And whatever enterprise the federal government was trying to keep everyone from engaging in, that helps them keep power. And right now we're just discussing the dollar. They would keep you out of that market. Well, now they can't keep anybody out of any market, because somebody will just pick their shit up. They will go where the U.S. can't bomb. They will set up a decentralized structure that will then functionally be everywhere, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. There are privacy coins that the federal government cannot follow the money through. I think there are other ones that they can. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But actually, I don't think it's going to matter either way here. I think Mimblewimble is going to be across the whole Web 3.0, and it's all going to be privacy. So we're going to have different kinds of legal systems and different kinds of human action, because the global legal systems are now kind of boxing each other to death. The dumb laws are dying to jurisdictional arbitrage. The activities that dumb laws keep you and I from engaging in, those laws are being avoided now. On a global scale.
Yeah, and I think that's the incentive, the recognition that you can do that. That's going to attract more and more people.
Right.
And
So then, listen, Libra looks like a huge cork. Okay, it looks like a huge cork. It's a basket of currencies. I know it's dollar, yen, euro, and I think the SDR. I don't think there's more. I thought it was those. I know it's dollar, yen, and euro. Basically, what happens is you be able to throw your dollars, yen, and euro into there, and if any one of them was to hyperinflate, they would hyperinflate against the others. So Libra is this whole other thing that this traditional function of what you and I would consider traditional government was currency. Well, guess what? Now private actors are getting into it. So you have private currency, you have government currency, and you have corporate currency. So really what people are going to have to start understanding in Web 3.0, call it World 2.0, welcome to Jetson world, is your currency is actually going to be kind of a demonstration of your ethics. Think of it as currency as a discipline. Most of your legal system is where your currency lies. Our legal system adjudicates everything in dollars. That's the way it is. So imagine wanting to abandon both the dollar and the American legal system. You would be able to functionally do that by changing currencies and changing legal systems. Now, if your currency and your legal system are set up differently, maybe you're not good at this, and maybe you're about to have, some kind of fidelity problem between the two. Maybe not. But you should look for, we all use the dollar in America, and we all adjudicate in the U.S. system. Is it possible to have a second layer right on top of it where we just kind of work around the other one because they're dumb? Yeah, it actually is. We can commit jurisdictional arbitrage right in people's face. So then the question is, are they going to take us hostage with guns? And the answer from Sergeant Gebert is no. No, you're not. But don't go picking fights with armed people. Figure out how to be your own senator. By the time you get to that place, all of this will hit the public sphere soon. So if the dollar starts having an abandonment issue because Fed policy of what we're all seeing develop on Bloomberg right now, then Libra kind of performs this plug for all of the fiat on the planet. It really does. So I think we're looking at the fiat apocalypse, and because the government has existed, because it manipulated currency, because it borrowed currency, and because it took currency from you, now the very currency that was the lifeblood of that organizational structure is being sapped out because you have other options. And the only thing the government really can do is keep large amounts of dollars in dollars. They can try to keep you from removing your money in mass, but they can't keep you from removing your money. Even if you had to pay a premium to get into crypto. And there's lots of services where you can hook your Coinbase, Abra. There's several services where you can hook your bank account right up to something and you'll pay, I don't know, 1.5%, 2% to get in. That's a pretty cheap premium. If you're bitching about a 2% premium about something, go away.
what do you think what if somehow a centralized authority took over Libra? And
it can't. That's the beautiful part about all these blockchain systems. As soon as somebody mentions the government can ban Bitcoin, the person reporting is a moron. Whatever they're reporting on, those people are morons. You cannot ban a decentralized system. It's everywhere. The government cannot police 300 million people's activity. They rely on everybody to obey. When you can all access an internet bank that isn't owned by anyone that they can't raid in your garage, they have no singular point bank to attack, and they have to attack all of the customers in their own homes, and they're not necessarily certain when they're banking. So they have no ability to enforce. It's a pure chaos system. It's a pure chaos system, but it functions because the rules of the chaos doesn't allow the double spend. That's all.
how would they not be able to see where the transactions are? Because everything's encrypted, but what if they're like, that's what I had trouble.
IP address with a wallet address. That's a limited skill set in and of itself. In and of itself, that's difficult. So a lot of people worried about their privacy. Do you know how to go? onto the blockchain, figure out where a transaction took place and when. No, you don't. There's 7 billion people on the planet. Maybe 100,000 of them have that ability on the planet. Some of them are in China. Some of them are in Europe. Some of them are in America. Some of them are in South America. Some of them are in Africa. No, how many of them work for the federal government? A couple thousand. And like, at a certain point, we all have to recognize that the government can't be everywhere. So this fear that they can be is irrational. And then supposedly the government works for us. Why are we taking orders from them at all? Doesn't make any sense. They enforce regulations on us because they're the servants. At a certain point, the perception is the deception.
I think that what I get caught up in, and I think that where everyone gets caught up into, like, we can, like, us kind of anarchists are, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what you are. I think that we're like, hey, look how, like, virtuous a society we can have, and it's not going to be perfect because humanity's not perfect, but it's going to be a hell of a lot better than the systems we have now, and a lot less the scope of good and, well, the scope of bad things, I guess, is limited. It's a lot more limited. But I think what people hold on to, and what I sometimes battle with, is that, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I hear people talk about, like, modern monetary theory, and they say, you know, you don't need to have, as long as your system isn't backed by anything, you can, you know, have an endless piggy bank, and whatever the government spends is a net asset for the people. And you can have, you know, you can make your society, you know, as long as there's the resources, you can spend on it, and it's a resource problem, not a money problem. And
well, of course. I mean, one, you can always phrase the coordination problem and success in any way that you want. You cannot make it happen in the parking lot any way that you want. So modern monetary theory sounds really good, because when you don't have any value backed by anything, by anything in three-dimensional space, you could just trick all of the humans into thinking that everything works on the digits, and because they don't recode and understand digits, that everything is awesome. That's what modern monetary theory is. You might as well be. I have literally, every time I sat down and tried to figure out what any of those people are saying, all I figured out is that they didn't know what they were saying. I did not figure out what they were saying. They didn't know what they were saying. You ask the questions. I want to hear a modern monetarist. Like, if anybody wants to send me a link on my Twitter to a modern monetarist theory, you know, and I don't mean the brief explanation. I'll do the 2-hour one. I want to find out that most people know what they're doing. I know what Keynesianism does. It's an economic defibrillator. You're going to stimulate, and you're going to do so by X procedure. You are going to.
I think that.
Whatever. Okay,
sorry to interrupt. I think Warren Mosler does a good job in explaining it, and he's who Bob Murphy debated that one time, and I mean it's kind of like hard to get through, but because a lot of it is like theory, and you know how exactly are you going through this, but what he does in his paper, he says at the end of it, he's like, well, what you do need in this system is a informed electorate, and I advocate for informed electorate. And the complete, like you're saying, the complete opposite, like if you have this system and you have people in there that, or even if it is we want this system kind of thing, it's, you don't have the resource knowledge of what you're spending on. You're like, oh, we can be, you know, it's all frivolous in a sense, and you know, hey, I don't know if this is going to be a good plan. It's like moral hazard all over the place, and that's the problem with it.
And if you're describing moral hazard, someone's describing an economic system to you in terms of why, not how. I never get through MMT because they're not describing enough how to get me from point A to point B. I get lost in the why every time. And when I ask how, they give me another why.
Right.
This happens because I like this. This happens because we like this. They'll start collectivizing the terms. We like this principle in general. Therefore, this portion must work because. Nope.
Right.
Yep. Specifically, everybody's going to have to like that principle because if they don't, it won't work.
Right.
Or if everybody doesn't like it, how many people have to like it before that principle becomes no longer systemically viable through lack of participation? So when you start basing these general statements on what people supposedly prefer, then you get these absolute statements of people who, you can rationalize anything at that time, but if you had to perform it in the parking lot, no.
Right.
You're running out of calories. It's a Rube Goldberg machine that you cannot talk over the river. You must find a bridge, or you must find a way to launch the next piece over the river. But at no point can you send hopes and prayers and likes and shares.